What's going on, everybody? We're back over here at this rack. I made a short about this earlier, and just the response from that, it seems like people want a full top to bottom rundown on these racks. And you know, I am a man of the people, so that's what I'm going to give you. So pretty much starting from the compressors, right? That's like the heart of our system. We'll go through that. As you can see straight away, we have a two-stage rack, or a split suction rack, not two-stage. Misspoke there, a split suction rack, right? So we have our low temp compressors on top, medium temp compressors on bottom. I've said this before, typically you could tell you have head fans on your low temp compressors, no head fans on your medium temp compressors. Now that's not always 100% the case, but in your typical supermarket refrigeration setup, that is how it's gonna be. So if we start from here, right, we have our discharge line coming out. This we'll get back to once we come back around. But you can see all these discharge lines are coming down, going back. Same thing from here, coming down, going back. And if we follow that, right, to right here, and you can see that discharge header right here. Right, and this discharge header from our low temp rack is gonna come down, meet in with our medium temp rack, and that's gonna come over, and that's gonna go to the inlet of our oil separator. So this oil separator here is a temprite, right? You see that right there, temprite, and it's known as a coalescing oil separator, right? So what that is it's got a coalescing filter. It's got a replaceable filter. You take this off, right? It's got a replaceable filter that sits down in there. Me, personally, I love these separators. They do really good for the system as long as you keep up on the maintenance for that filter, which this one you can see 924. So I'm gonna recommend to this customer that we come back and replace this. But these coalescing filters, whether it's Temprite, Westermeyer, whatever, I really like the coalescing type. And then you see we come off the bottom, so there is a float down here in the bottom of this separator, right? The float that regulates the oil. Follow it up, comes into our secondary oil filter. Now technically with these systems, you don't really need that, but it's not a bad idea to have it, right? Follow that up, that comes into our reservoir. So this oil system is a low pressure oil system, right? Meaning we have high pressure here and lower pressure here. This is our OCV, our oil check valve, right? So this, let's see if this one says on there. Usually they say on there, might be on the back side. Right there. Oh, come on, baby, focus, baby, focus. So that is an OCV 30. So what that means is that's gonna regulate this separator, this reservoir pressure 30 pounds above the suction pressure, right? And you can see right here, this line comes up, over, see if we can follow it, boom, right here, into our medium temp, our plus 18, this is our medium temp header, right? So, plus 18, what is that? What kind of gas is this? 448A? Actually, if we come over here, probably tells us right here, so we'll say it's plus 18, right? We got 15, 20, we'll take the middle, so that's about 40 pounds. So this reservoir should be keeping this reservoir at about 70 PSI, right? And the reason why we need that oil differential is number one, we don't want high pressure oil. We don't want the discharge pressure going into our crankcase or into these oil fails, right? And the reason being is if you have too high pressure, you're gonna start blowing that oil out, right? It's not actually gonna accumulate the oil in there, it's just gonna be so high, it's gonna be pushing it out. Number two, we need we need enough pressure differential to where we can move the oil, right? Just like with the rest of refrigeration, you need that pressure differential in order to move, right? And that goes for oil, refrigerant, whatever. If you notice, everything's based off of pressure differential, and that's how we get everything to circulate, right? And then all this stuff on the compressor we'll come back to here in a second once we're done with this. Right, so we have our inlet, goes through that filter, comes out, you know, majority of the oil should be separated, and then we come out and we go into right here. This is our three-way valve. So this is what's known as a three-way valve. This three-way valve goes to water reclaim, right? And I know that because this says pipe from H2O reclaim outlet. So what happens, this pipe, right, is going up. If we follow that, it's gonna come over. Boom, right here. So a lot of stores will do this where they source their hot water from the rack, right? And it's basically, it makes sense because it's free heating. That discharge line is always gonna be hot, always, right? As long as the rack is running, that discharge line is gonna be hot. So what they do is they utilize that, bring that hot gas in to heat this water, and if we follow it, it comes back up. Also goes that one, but comes back up, right? And it comes back into our rack. And then this, so it comes back in. This is still our discharge line, so it doesn't feel like heat reclaim is running right now because this is pretty fucking hot. Let's see. No, that shit's fucking hot, right? So it comes out of our heat reclaim discharge line and then goes into, in this case, this is our condenser, right? So for this specific rack, this is the condenser. This is just a flat plate heat exchanger, and it's using water as the cooling medium, right? Condenser water inlet. So this is going probably, if we follow that, that comes down into that rack, and that goes up into here, right? That goes somewhere fucking over into there. There's probably a condenser. I'm not 100% sure, honestly. It could be city water, but I doubt it. There's probably a gas cooler, a condenser up there, like a water tower, a water loop, right? But we have water coming in, cooling that refrigerant, and then our water coming out, right? Normally you'll feel a temperature difference, which I do. It's a little bit cooler here than it is here, right? But it's the same thing as like a normal condenser, but it's just a flat plate heat exchanger, and we're using water as that cooling medium, right? So that discharge line comes in, our liquid line comes out, right? So this would be like our drop leg. And if we follow that drop leg, right, you can see it right there in the back, that drop leg comes over and hits our receiver. This is our vertical receiver, and this is a fucking pretty big one, right? We got our sight glasses on our receiver. Typically you want to see at least the bottom one filled, right? You can see this one's got that bottom ball floating, so that's good. That means that we're gonna have a good liquid seal coming out of that receiver. If we follow that receiver line out, you can see it comes out, goes into our dryers, but also it's got this line, which I think this is genius. This should be on every rack. This is your bypass line right here. So what you can do is if you got to change these dryers, you can shut off this ball valve, shut off this ball valve, open that ball valve, and keep the rack running while you're changing those dryers. Right, so I really think, I personally think every rack should be designed with this bypass, because it means you don't have to take the rack down to change these dryers. You just open that bypass and keep it running. But follow this up, we got our liquid line that then goes into our subcooler, right? So what the subcooler does, obviously our condenser takes that hot discharge, that superheated discharge vapor, condenses it down into a high temp liquid or a high pressure liquid, goes into our receiver, right? What this does is it's gonna cool that liquid even more, and what it's doing is it's making that liquid more dense. So you're gonna get more cooling out of that liquid after this subcooler. And typically the subcoolers are set to like 45 to 55 degrees. I would have to check the controller to see what that one is set for. But you can see we have our liquid line that comes up into our subcooler and then comes out, and if you follow this line, into our liquid header, right? So our liquid header is right here. You can see we got our sight glass right there, and you can see where we're starting to stub off our circuits, right? But where is this subcooler? How does this work? So think of the subcooler as like another circuit on the rack. So this is just another evaporator on the rack. There's a couple different ways you can do this. The way that they're doing this here is they're actually using this has a circuit from this other rack, from B rack, right? So you can see right here, B21 circuit from rack B header. So this is your liquid line. It's a little tight, so I'm trying to get it as best I can, right? This is your liquid line right here that comes into this stepper valve. That stepper valve is going to regulate the amount of refrigerant going into this subcooler. And then you have, damn it, your suction line coming out of the top of your subcooler. And you can see it comes into this line that then goes back to this B rack. And if we follow these lines over, boom, right there with the that line set line's right there with that EPR. So that's how you're gonna basically manage your subcooler temp. Jesus. Right, so just like any other evaporator that you have on a rack, we're using this EPR to control our evap temperature, which in this case is just a subcooler. So like I said, think of that flat plate heat exchanger as just another evaporator, right? And then this one right here, you can see this one is the rack B subcooler. You can see what they're doing on this one. I said that there's a couple different ways to do this. So they're running this subcooler just off this rack. So you can see, where's the liquid line? Liquid line right here, coming into this subcooler is literally just coming off of your liquid header, right? So, like I said, or not your liquid header, but your liquid line coming out of your receiver. It's going in, all it's doing is teeing off and then feeding that liquid line for your subcooling side. So back over to this rack, like I said, we got our liquid header that then comes out, sight glass, and you can see it kind of 90s into the top and hits this header. And this is where all of our circuit ball valves are gonna pick up that liquid header, right? You can see right now, we basically just have these two loops. So this, you can see loop A for the low temp, loop A1 for the medium temp. So A1, A2. Right? This is your medium temp, this is your low temp. So these, I've always been taught and referred to these as combo circuits, right? Some of them call them loops. Obviously it says loop right there, but basically in this instance it would be a loop, but you could also call it a combo circuit because you have multiple different circuits that are on this one header, right? So say I have system 34, 35, 36 on this header, and then we got like 37, 38 on this one. This would be my combo loop. So if I had to shut down on and work on any of the circuits, say I had to shut down and work on system 34, I'd also be shutting down system 35 and 36 by pumping this down, right? So we have our liquid that goes out. Obviously that goes to the cases, suction comes back, and then you can see right here we have our split suction. So this is your bypass valve for that suction. And what's gonna happen is if, I think I just went over this in a recent video, but basically you can open and close this valve. So that way, if typically your low side suction, if it's struggling, or sorry, your medium temp side suction, if it's struggling, you can use those low temp compressors to pick up that load, but you could probably go both ways. But this right here is your ball valve, so you can see your ball valve is going this direction, and then your valve right here, they have it marked, but it's also, it's always going, the direction of flow is always going with that CDS valve, right? But we follow this suction header down, and you can see it just goes into the back of your compressors and restarts that cycle, right? Now, a couple things that this rack has, that's not, you know, it's not 100% unique to all racks, but not every rack has this. Is first, you have your liquid injection, right? So this is your liquid injection header right here. And if we look at that line, right, you can see that your liquid injection line is just coming off your liquid header. So that's that liquid injection line right there. We follow it down. It's coming right here, stubbing off your liquid line coming out of your receiver and before your subcooler. Real nice. You got a sight glass right there, which that one is showing to be like half full right now. But you can see these go through these solenoids and then go through these TXBs basically. So this is essentially a fixed TXB, right? And it's got this sensing bulb that comes over onto your discharge line. So just like a TXB, there's a pressure inside this bulb. I think it's just nitrogen, but I could be 100% wrong on that. And as that liquid line heats up, it's gonna open this little liquid injection TXB more and more, right? So it'll feed more and more of that liquid into right there, where that's typically, it's called your inner chamber, right? So you're not feeding it directly into the heads, you're not feeding it directly into the suction, you're feeding it into what's called that inner chamber. And so what that's doing is that's just cooling down the compressor, right? That has nothing to do with capacity. That's just as that compressor gets overheated or starts to heat up, it'll start shooting that liquid in there to start cooling that compressor, right? And again, you notice none of these medium temp compressors have that. So that's typically a thing just for low temp compressors. All right, and then something else on these compressors. So these are your high pressure controls. They work like a standard high pressure control. These ones are made by Alco. A lot of times they're called, I hear them called like peanut controls or whatever. I like these, they work real good. You know, this one's obviously a manual reset with that button. If they don't have a button, they're either a low pressure control or an auto reset. And then this, I call this a Delta Pi, but it's Delta P2. This is your oil your oil safety fail, right? There's some fancy stuff in there. It looks through like a glass or some shit. Honestly, I'm not super educated on these. I've worked on them in the past. But it's just another oil fill. But if I did need to work on this, I probably would have to like download the manual to see exactly how it works. But again, just your oil safety. This right here, that's your oil control, your oil level control. This one is made by Emerson, right? And it is called an OMC. And this one specifically is an OMC 240. That one's an OMC 240. So if you're familiar with the OMBs that you see on like a lot of protocols, it's the same thing. It does the same thing, but the C means that it runs off of your control voltage. So normally with like an OMB, you have a step down transformer that goes to 24 volts to power the module, right? Well, with these, you can just use the control voltage for your compressors and your contactors. That way you don't have to have another control voltage going to these. And then on here, we can see these are unloaders, right? So this compressor has 2 unloaders on it. And how these work is basically there's this solenoid, right? When capacity goes down, it'll unload this head, right? It'll keep this compressor running, it'll unload this head. And this is a form of capacity control. That way you're not kicking this compressor on, off, right? So you can run this compressor as that capacity goes down, this will energize, it'll unload that head. And basically what happens is it just takes that piston out of play, and that hot gas, instead of going through the reeds and everything, it'll just go straight through, right? Same thing here. And then as capacity goes back up, it needs more compressor capacity. It'll de-energize these, put those pistons back into play, and it'll load up that compressor. So that's why they're called unloaders. It's loading and unloading that compressor. Let's see. Anything else that we haven't gone over? Obviously for this rack, right, we have all of our compressor toggles here. All of our circuit switches are over here. This is our RDP, which is a remote defrost panel. So you can see, right, we have all of our circuit switches, and then we have majority of our boards, all of our defrost contactors. This is in a separate panel. Not always the case for every rack, but it's not uncommon to see, right? And then for the control for this rack, we have this E3. So Emerson E3 right now, I'm looking at the AS plus 18 rack, right? And this is just, it's just like any other control system where it gives you all of the basic information of the rack. You know, the refrigerant, it's being controlled off the vapor, set points, right? My set point's 35 pounds, dead bound's 2 pounds. My float, right? But if you go to this is pretty cool. You know, you go to your refrigeration tab, shows you all your circuits, your system, shows you all your boards, right? So just like any other standard refrigeration control. You know, this one just happens to be a touchscreen. It's a little bit fancier, but it does everything else that a controller does. And I think that's pretty much it, man. That's a rundown of the rack. That goes through, I think, pretty much everything. If I missed something, let me know. But yeah, I can't really think of anything else to go over. I mean, we went front to back on this thing. So if there is something I missed or anything else that you want to know, drop it in the comments. As always, I appreciate everybody. Like, subscribe, share, comment, do all the things. And yeah, we'll catch you guys next time. Later.